I didn't say a word. Not when the doctor whispered, "Stage 4." Not when clumps of my hair curled at the bottom of the drain like dark secrets. Not even on Christmas Eve, when the house smelled of cinnamon, the tree blinked softly, and my daughter Emma leaned in and whispered, "Promise me you'll always be here, Mom." I smiled, and I lied. That night I wrapped their gifts with trembling hands, knowing I might not live to see them open next year's. But I couldn't break them, so I broke myself instead. Because when you're a mother, pain isn't something you share. It's something you bury, deep enough that no one hears it screaming back. I thought I was protecting them by staying silent, but silence has a cost. It stole my chance to say goodbye. It nearly stole the one thing I fought hardest to keep, their trust. Still hear the way Daniel, my youngest, asked, "Mom, why are you hiding pills in the bathroom?" His eyes were wide, his voice cracked, and I lied again. God forgive me. This story isn't just about cancer. It's about every mother who's ever swallowed her pain for the sake of her children. It's about the loneliness behind a brave smile, and the night everything I was hiding finally shattered. They say I was strong, but the truth, I was scared and completely alone. If you've ever held in your tears to protect the people you love, if you've ever wondered what your mother was really going through, please, stay with me. Tap like if this touched your heart. Share your story in the comments. I'm listening. And subscribe to this channel. Somewhere, a mother is still pretending to be okay. Let her know she's not alone. The fluorescent lights made the walls hum. That kind of sterile hum that fills the space between thoughts, between what you hear and what you can't process. I sat there in a hard chair with squeaky rubber tips on the legs, a thin folder on, the table between us like a bomb waiting to go off. And then he said it. Stage 4. No dramatic pause, no trembling voice. He said it like someone reading the specials off a menu. Chicken marsala, stage 4. I blinked once, twice. Something behind my eyes tightened and then loosened. I didn't ask him to repeat it. I didn't cry. I noticed a dark spot between his teeth. Spinach, I thought. From lunch, maybe. I fixated on that because it was easier than thinking about what he'd just said. My hands were still. They rested one on top of the other, like a polite guest in a funeral pew. But inside me, something was combusting. My bones felt hot, my breath shallow like I was drowning on dry land. I nodded, not because I understood, but because nodding was something I could do. On the drive home, the sun was a little too bright, the air a little too thick. A baby in the next car looked at me through the window, his tiny hands pressed against the glass. He laughed when I made a silly face. I think I smiled too. Or maybe that was a muscle spasm. At the house, the silence hit me first. It was always loud before the kids got home. But that day, it felt cavernous. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door, pulled off my shoes, peeled off the hospital bracelet and tossed it in the trash. It made a soft sound, like defeat. I cooked dinner like I wasn't dying, seasoned the chicken, boiled rice, turned everything into a recipe, a routine, a way to pretend the world hadn't just cracked in half. Emma came in, her cheeks flushed and her ponytail bouncing. 97 on my math test, she said like she'd won the lottery. I smiled, told her I was proud. Daniel was behind her, dragging his backpack, holding a drawing. It's a dragon, he said. It was purple and fierce, and somehow smiling. I kissed their foreheads like I always did. I tucked them in and made promises I didn't know if I could keep. Tomorrow, pancakes, I said. Chocolate chip. They didn't notice the tremble in my voice. When the house finally went dark, I sat at the edge of my bed. I looked into the hallway, like I expected something to be standing there, something waiting. I whispered, not to God, but to something older, darker, more desperate. Don't let them watch me disappear. Because I could handle dying. I just couldn't handle them watching. It happened, and the worst part? I didn't look sick. Not yet. Christmas hit like a punch from behind. Too fast, too bright, too much pretending. I sat on the edge of the couch, the wrapping paper crinkling under my trembling fingers. Each tear sounded like brittle bones snapping. The ribbons curled in my lap, mocking me with their festive cheer. The tree blinked at me with its blinking lights, a plastic sentinel in the corner, covered in fake snow and real fear. Aaron noticed. His eyes narrowed just enough to see past my smile. "You look pale," he said softly. "Are you okay?" I shook my head, forcing a laugh that cracked like dry ice. "Stress," I said. "Too much work. And maybe the cinnamon in my lattes. You know, seasonal." He frowned but didn't press. That was Aaron. Practical, steady, the kind of man who preferred problems solved, not sobbed over. I envied him that sometimes. Emma bounded into the room, her cheeks rosy, clutching something behind her back. "Mom!" she exclaimed, thrusting a small package into my hands. Inside was a homemade ornament, lopsided but perfect. A glittering star with the words scrawled in crayon. "To Mom, my forever hero." I blinked, swallowed the lump in my throat. She believed that about me, even when I didn't. Later, I hid in the bathroom, the door locked tight behind me. The world outside faded to a dull hum. I sobbed silently into the hand towel, its rough fibers catching my tears like tiny, cruel hands. I wished it could soak up the sickness from my body, too. Chemo was scheduled for the following week. I lied to everyone and called it a wellness retreat with work. Something vague enough to sound like an escape, not a death sentence. I packed a yoga mat and loose clothes, tucked them carefully into my bag. The pretense felt like armor, but inside I was just raw nerve endings exposed the night after the sickness hit like a tidal wave. I threw up behind the rose bush in the garden, the petals trembling but not flinching. Nature didn't care. It never did. To cover the scent, I lit a cinnamon candle. Its warm, spicy smoke curled around the edges of my misery, trying to mask the metallic taste in my mouth and the bitter bile in my stomach. Cinnamon was supposed to be comforting. It was a lie. That night, sleep was a cruel thief. I dreamed I was hugging Emma and Daniel tightly, feeling their warmth and breath against my skin. But as I held them, they passed right through me, ghosts who didn't know I was already fading. I woke up gasping, heart pounding like a frantic drummer in a dark, empty hall. Aaron found me in the kitchen, eyes rimmed red, staring at a mug of cold tea. He didn't ask what I'd been dreaming. Sometimes silence says more than questions. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confess every secret I was carrying, every fracture I felt inside me. But instead, I forced another smile, traced my fingers around the mug like it was the last anchor to sanity I had left. "We'll get through this," I whispered, mostly to myself. But deep down, the words felt hollow, like echoes in an empty room. And Christmas kept spinning, a carousel of lights and lies, while I counted the days until the retreat that would change everything. My hair clumped in the shower drain like a slow betrayal. I told myself it was the shampoo, a new brand I never bought, a gift from some careless impulse. But the truth clung to me like the wet strands slipping down the drain, impossible to ignore. Emma found a long strand on her pillow. She held it between her fingers, delicate and accusing. "It's yours, right?" Her voice was soft, but her eyes, those sharp, innocent eyes, already knew more than I wanted to admit. I wanted to say it was nothing. Just hair. Just normal. But lying to her felt like slicing a piece out of myself. And every time I blinked, the cut throbbed. Daniel tripped on the porch that afternoon. His small body sprawled against the cracked concrete, the scraping sound sharp in the quiet. I dropped everything, my arms catching him like a lifeline, tight enough to leave bruises but not enough to hurt him. His eyes looked up at me, trusting and wide, as if I could fix everything by holding on just a little longer. Aaron touched me that night in bed. A simple brush of his fingers, but my body flinched like it remembered a danger only I could see. I forced a smile, the kind that cracked at the edges, and tried to fold myself into the lie that everything was fine. I skipped my checkup. Daniel had a school play that night, The Giving Tree. He was a tiny tree, limbs shaking under a green costume that smelled like felt and hope. I clapped so hard my palms stung, hoping the sound could drown out the ticking clock in my chest. When the lights dimmed and the curtain fell, Daniel's small hand found mine. That night, in the dark, he whispered, "Are you okay, Mommy?" "Dada the bar." Weight of the question pressed down on me like the silence after a storm. I wanted to shatter the lie and tell him everything. The ache, the fear, the slow crumbling inside. But instead I whispered back, "Yes," again and again. The truth was a monster I kept caged behind my smile, a secret I wrapped around them like a fragile blanket. I've never told a lie that hurt so much, never protected them from something so devastating. How do you lie to a child when every lie feels like a crack in the foundation of their world? I watch Emma fold that strand of hair between her fingers. Later, as if trying to stitch together a puzzle she wasn't ready to solve. And Daniel, who keeps asking for pancakes and promises, for a normal that I'm too tired to give. The house feels heavy, shadows gathering in corners where laughter used to live. And somewhere deep inside, I wonder if the lie will hold, or if the truth will shatter us all. He started working late, longer hours, or at least that's what he told me. But I saw through the cracks, through the empty excuses like the ones I used to tell myself in the beginning. When denial was the only way to breathe, one evening, I caught him sitting in the car for 10 long minutes. Just sitting. Not moving, not calling anyone. Just staring at the dashboard like it held the answers he was too scared to find. I pressed my forehead against the cold window and watched the quiet unravel. His smile, once warm and steady, started to falter. It slipped, fading like a photograph left out in the sun. When he kissed me, it was quick and mechanical, like touching ice that might break if held too long. His hugs became brief and stiff, as if he was already loosening his grip on me. I asked him once, quietly, if something was wrong. He looked at me, eyes flickering, then said, "No, you just seem distant lately." Distant, as if that word could capture the chasm opening beneath my feet while I was dying inside, still folding school uniforms and packing lunches like a ghost going through the motions. One night, desperate for a shred of the man I married, I reached for him. My fingers brushed his arm and he flinched, like my touch had become radioactive, toxic. His eyes darted away, avoiding mine as if I were a stranger wearing his wife's face. A week later, I found a receipt tucked inside a coat pocket. It was for a necklace. Not mine. My neck was too thin now for any sparkle anyway. I didn't confront him, not yet. I was too tired to bleed and fight on the same day. My body was busy holding itself together, my heart too fragile for another kind of break. The next morning, he smiled at Emma like he used to smile at me. Soft, easy, full of something I hadn't seen in a while. It was a smile rehearsed, a mask slipping on to hide the cracks underneath. I wondered bitterly if he had already started practicing life without me. Practicing the future where I was a shadow he'd learned to forget. The quiet between us grew heavier, a weight pressing into my ribs. I caught myself watching him in the kitchen. How he poured his coffee, how his fingers trembled slightly when he thought I wasn't looking. The man I knew was still there, but he was wrapped in silence. A stranger wearing my husband's skin. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear the creak of the front door as he slipped out for one more errand, one more excuse. And in the dark, alone, with the sound of my own breath, I'd wonder if he was running from me, or from what he saw in my eyes. I didn't want to lose him. Not like this. But every day the distance grew. Every smile that wasn't quite his. Every touch that recoiled. Every secret purchase whispered a story I wasn't ready to hear. Still, I held on. Because in this slow unraveling, I was fighting not just for my life, but for the pieces of us that still believed in forever. Even if forever was starting to look a lot like goodbye, I wasn't snooping. At least that's what I kept telling myself as I rifled through the cluttered mess in the back of the closet. I was looking for an old scarf, one of those soft wool ones that still smelled faintly like cedar from last winter. But what I found instead was an envelope, yellowed at the edges and tucked beneath a pile of winter coats and a broken umbrella. My name was written on it, his handwriting, slanted, hurried, but with a softness I didn't expect, like the ink was barely holding itself together, like it was trying not to scream. I pulled the envelope free and held it in my hands, feeling the weight of it as if it were made of stone. My fingers trembled while I peeled it open, the paper crackling softly like a secret being ripped from its hiding place. Inside, the words hit me like a fist to the gut. It wasn't a love letter. Far from it. It was a resignation. From us. From everything we had built. I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger. I need something real. Something alive. The sentence blurred as my eyes blinked fast, the room tilting sideways like I was on the deck of a sinking ship. My breath turned glass, sharp, shallow, cutting me from the inside out. He hadn't left yet, but in that moment I knew he was already gone, not in body, but in spirit, in mind. He'd checked out, slipped through cracks I didn't even see forming beneath our feet. I sank to the floor, legs folded awkwardly beneath me, clutching the letter as if it might hold him there somehow. But all it did was tear open the wound wider. The wedding photo sat on the dresser across the room, catching the weak afternoon light. I looked at it, the smiles frozen forever in silver and white. The promise of forever, now just a cruel joke. For a long time, I didn't move. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't a mother. Not in that moment. I was just abandoned. The silence stretched around me, thick and suffocating. Outside, the wind pushed against the windows, a relentless whisper that echoed the pounding in my chest. How did we get here? When had the distance between us become a chasm so wide I could no longer see the man I married, the one who once held my hand like a lifeline? The letter felt like a betrayal wrapped in quiet desperation. I wanted to scream, to rip the pages apart and demand answers that would never come. But I was too tired, too broken. The clock ticked on, relentless and indifferent. I folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. a fragile thing that held the weight of 1,000 shattered dreams. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, this was the end of us. I tried to be normal, made pancakes, burned 3. Daniel said they tasted like charcoal. I said it was an ancient recipe. He laughed, but his eyes didn't quite meet mine. My chest felt like a locked door no one had the key to. Cold, heavy, and impossible to open. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours, eyes dry, soul soaked. Aaron didn't come home until 2 a.m. No excuse, no lie, just silence. He slipped into bed like a ghost, quiet and distant. I watched him sleep, peacefully, like nothing was dying in the next room. I walked barefoot to the kitchen, cold tile pressed into my skin. I felt every chill, like it was trying to cut through me. Opened the drawer, stared at the bottle of sleeping pills, counted them one by one. 6 left. I didn't take them. But for the first time, I thought I could, and that scared me more than the cancer ever had. I leaned against the counter, breath catching in my throat like a secret trying to escape. The house was too quiet, the ticking of the clock louder than my own heartbeat. A whisper crawled in my mind, soft but persistent. What if? What if I just let it go? What if the locked door inside me swung open and I finally stepped through? I remembered the last time I saw my mother cry, years ago, when I was a kid. She stood in the kitchen with flour on her hands, silent, broken. I promised myself I'd never be like that. But here I was, standing in that same kitchen, feeling the same fracture. Aaron stirred in bed. A sigh escaped him. I wanted to reach for him, to grab hold of something real. But my fingers trembled, like they belonged to someone else. The dark was too thick tonight. It wrapped around me like a shroud. I sank to the floor, back against the cold cabinet. My mind raced through memories. Emma's laughter, Daniel's drawings, Aaron's quiet strength. They were anchors pulling me back, but the weight was unbearable. A sharp pang in my chest, like a knife twisting, reminded me this was real. I thought about calling Aaron, waking him up, breaking the silence between us, but the words caught in my throat, tangled in fear and shame. Instead, I whispered to the shadows, I'm still here. I'm still fighting. The night stretched endlessly, and I waited for dawn like it was salvation. Somewhere in the distance, a bird sang, the first fragile note of morning. I closed my eyes and let the tears fall, hot, unrelenting, but somehow cleansing. I didn't take the pills, not tonight, because even in the darkest night, a flicker of hope survives. And maybe, just maybe, tomorrow could be different. I caught my reflection brushing Emma's hair, gaunt, sunken eyes like dried out wells. The kind of face you see in nightmares, pale, hollow, a ghost trying to mother the living. Emma looked up at me and said softly, "You look sad, Mommy." I smiled. Not because I felt it, but because it was the only thing I knew how to do. A reflex, a shield. That smile became my new practice. I rehearsed it in mirrors, in silent rooms, in the spaces between sobs. I learned to stretch my lips just so, to keep my eyes from leaking what my heart couldn't hold back. I tried to be beautiful again, or maybe just visible. I bought red lipstick, something bold, something alive. I swiped it on my lips like armor before Aaron came home. He didn't notice. Emma did. "You look like a movie star, Mommy," she said, eyes wide and sincere. That almost made me cry, because she saw through the fog I'd built around myself. She saw me when I didn't. That night, after the house fell silent, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and whispered, "Don't disappear." I wanted to believe it was a plea to some invisible force. But deep down, I knew it was a lie. I could feel it happening, bit by bit, grief by grief. The woman I used to be was packing her bags. She didn't shout or slam doors. She slipped out quietly, leaving only the echo of what was once there. I caught glimpses in empty rooms, the echo of her laughter, the crease of her favorite sweater, the faint scent of vanilla and old books. I'd reach out, but her hand slipped through mine like smoke. I looked at Aaron and felt the growing distance between us like a slow tide pulling us apart. He tried to hold on. I could see it in the way he sat beside me on the couch, in the way he hesitated before touching my hand. But the truth was, I wasn't the woman he married anymore. I wasn't sure who I was now. Sometimes I imagined my reflection as a stranger, the lines around her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged, the tired set of her jaw. This stranger carried my face, but inside she was a hollow room. I was afraid that one day Emma would look in the mirror and not recognize her mother at all. That she'd see a ghost where once there was a woman full of fire. So I held on to the small things, Emma's laughter, the smell of cinnamon in the kitchen, the way Daniel's hand felt in mine during bedtime stories. But even those flickers were fragile, like candlelight fighting a storm. And still, every night, when the house breathed in darkness, I stood before the mirror and whispered, "Don't disappear." Because somewhere beneath this fragile shell, I hoped the woman I lost was still fighting to come back. And maybe, just maybe, so was I. Emma asked me if I was going to die. Her voice was small, like a whisper caught in a storm. I heard it before I saw her standing in the doorway, eyes wide, searching for the truth buried beneath my tired smile. Kids know. They always do. Before the words even make it out of our mouths, before the secrets twist into lies, they feel the weight of the shadows we hide. I knelt down beside her, pulled her close, and said, "No, sweetie, Mommy's just tired." It was a lie wrapped in love, soft and smooth, like velvet over a broken glass. She nodded, trusting me because I was supposed to be the fortress that kept the night at bay. But that night, as I tucked her into bed, I felt her little hands gripping my arm tighter than usual, a silent plea I couldn't answer. After she drifted off to sleep, I sat in the quiet and told her stories from when I was a girl. Stories filled with hope, with stars scattered across the sky like promises. I spun tales about secret gardens where pain didn't exist, where laughter lived in the air and dreams could stretch forever. I was rewriting my childhood, twisting the past into something softer, something bright enough to light her dark corners. Daniel was different. He didn't ask questions. Instead, he gave me a picture he had drawn. A simple thing, really. Just a sketch of the three of us. But there I was, with a halo glowing above my head like I was an angel sent to protect them. It broke me more than I wanted to admit, because in that drawing, Daniel saw me as more than just Mom. He saw me as something fragile, something holy and untouchable. I told Aaron about the picture, hoping for some shared sadness, maybe a crack in his usual calm. But he just shrugged, like it was nothing more than kids being dramatic. "They don't understand," he said. "It's just a phase." And maybe he was right. Or maybe he was protecting himself with that dismissal, because I used to think love was about surviving storms, about standing tall, no matter how hard the wind blew. Now, I know it's about the umbrella someone brings you when the roof caves in. It's the quiet moments when no words are needed, the hands that hold you steady when everything inside feels like it's breaking. The lie I told Emma wasn't just about shielding her from the truth. It was about holding on to the fragile thread of normalcy, about protecting her from the storm raging inside me. Because some truths are too heavy for little hearts. But those hands gripping my arm, they were the real story, the part I couldn't lie about. I am tired, yes, but I'm still here, still fighting for them, for every whispered promise I can't keep yet, for the love that holds me up when my own strength fails. And maybe that's what matters most, not surviving the storm, but who's there with the umbrella when it all falls apart. I wrote him a letter. Not one of those frantic, messy pages where the ink smears because the hand trembles too much. No, this one was simple, clean, honest. If you're going to leave, at least let me fall apart with dignity. I folded it twice, slipped it into the pocket of his old jacket, one he wore when the world was easier, when we still knew how to laugh without the weight of secrets pressing on our chests. The jacket smelled faintly of his cologne, the one that reminded me of Saturday mornings and coffee steaming between us. He didn't mention the letter. Days passed like heavy footsteps on creaky floors. The kids laughed and cried and fought over tiny things, Legos, TV shows, who got the last piece of pizza. The house smelled of cinnamon and something burnt. Probably me, forgetting the oven was on. I watched Aaron move through the rooms like a ghost, avoiding my eyes, avoiding everything, like the letter was a landmine. Then one afternoon, out of nowhere, he came home early. No explanation, no, "Hey, I'm back." Just the sound of the front door clicking softly behind him. I was folding laundry, t-shirts with their names scrawled inside, socks missing partners. He stood beside me quiet. The kids were at school. He didn't speak for a long time, just watched the empty space where their toys spilled across the floor. Finally, he whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore." The words landed between us like shards of glass, sharp, dangerous, familiar. I didn't have an answer. I swallowed the lump in my throat and said, "Me neither. But they still need us to be someone." No promises, no lies, just that raw truth hanging there in the dim light of the afternoon. We sat together on the worn-out couch. No touch, no tears, just the sound of our breathing, the faint ticking of the clock. Something cracked open. Not forgiveness, not healing, not even hope. But maybe a pause, a break in the endless bleeding that had soaked through every corner of our lives. Hours later, when the night wrapped around the house like a thick blanket, the kids asleep and the world hushed, I felt his hand brush against mine. No words, no awkwardness, just warmth. He held my hand in his sleep. I didn't pull away. I let myself believe, just for a moment, that maybe we weren't lost. Maybe somehow we were still here. Broken, yes, but holding on. And in that fragile grasp, I found a tiny thread of strength. Because sometimes surviving isn't about fixing the unfixable. It's about staying. When all you want to run, it's about holding on, not just to each other, but to the hope that the cracks might one day let light. In that night, I fell asleep, with his hand wrapped around mine. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I woke up at sunrise. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. The first light spilled across the floor like a promise, soft and hesitant, but stubborn. It touched my skin through the cracked window, and I let it. No dread waiting for me in the corners, no silent countdown to the next bad news, just light. I moved slow, like a person who's been underwater too long, but finally breaking the surface. Coffee. I made it bitter because sweet felt like lying. Sitting on the porch, I let the quiet wrap around me like a worn blanket. The world was still there, the chaos still buzzing somewhere in the distance, but not inside me. At least, not yet. I called my sister. The words stumbled out of me, messy and raw. Every broken, ugly part I'd been hiding. The fear, the loneliness, the exhaustion of carrying a secret so heavy it felt like it could crush me. She cried on the other end, and I let her, because this time I didn't say, "I'm fine." Not once. It was like peeling away 1,000 layers of armor I didn't realize I'd been wearing. Erin brought me breakfast. Toast, burnt on the edges. I didn't care. That little burnt corner tasted like hope, like a sign that despite everything, he hadn't walked out. His eyes met mine, steady and less distant, like he was trying to say, "I'm here." We didn't talk much that morning. No dramatic confessions or promises. Just small moments that spoke louder than words. Like the way he poured the coffee without spilling. Like the way Emma ran into my arms as if I was whole. Like I had never left myself. I laughed then. Ugly and loud and free. The kind of laugh that rattles the bones and shakes the dust off the soul. It startled even me. Cancer was still there. The fear, the pain, the chaos. But in that morning light, none of it was bigger than my choice to live. I chose life. Not perfect, not painless, but mine. The weight hadn't disappeared, but I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. For the first time in a long time, I felt the possibility of breathing, of waking up and wanting to be here. Not because I had to, but because I could. Sometimes that's all it takes. One day, one breath, one decision. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to start living again. If you've ever felt like you were disappearing inside your own life, know you're not alone. Sometimes choosing to live again begins with the smallest gesture. A warm cup of coffee, an unexpected hug, or simply telling yourself the truth.